You won't believe what's happening right now. China has completely wiped out the US farming industry. Soybean farmers are losing around $3 per bushel, which adds up to a staggering $45,000 loss for just one farm. Corn, wheat, and other crops are plummeting in value too. The trade war with China has forced them to turn to countries like Brazil and Argentina, leaving US farmers in the dust. So how did it all go downhill so fast? And is there any way back from this?
Mexico and Canada are two of the biggest exporters of fresh fruit and vegetables to the United States. In 2022, Mexico supplied 51% of fresh fruit and 69% of fresh vegetables imported into the U.S., while Canada supplied 2% of fresh fruit and 20% of fresh vegetables.
The US farming industry is in free fall, and the numbers are downright painful. Take soybeans, for example. Farmers are losing about $3 per bushel compared to last year. That doesn't sound too bad until you realize the scale. For a farmer producing 14,000 bushels, pretty standard, that's a jaw-dropping $45,000 gone. That's not just tightening your belt territory, that's a full-blown financial hemorrhage. Now imagine this playing out across thousands of farms. It's devastating, plain and simple. But here's the kicker, it's not just soybeans. Corn, wheat, and other crops are on the same sinking ship. These are the backbone of rural America's economy, but right now, they're dead weight dragging everyone down. Farmers are fighting battles on multiple fronts, erratic weather, rising costs, and now collapse of their most lucrative export markets. It's like playing a rigged game where no matter how hard you try, you still lose. And yet you've got these farmers clinging to hope because, well, let's face it, that's what farmers do. Generations of hard work, grit, and determination aren't just going to disappear overnight. They're holding on to the idea that this might be temporary, that things could bounce back. But let's be real, when the market's rigged against you, optimism only goes so far. The sad reality is, unless something changes and fast, many of these farms won't make it. It's heartbreaking because these aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, these are people, well, families, who are losing everything they've built.
He tried this once before on soybeans, and it ended up with subsidies that the American government had to pay the farmers who were the victim of retaliatory tariffs from China.
Here's where it all started to go downhill, the infamous US-China trade war. What was once supposed to be a power move to level the playing field turned into an all-out economic brawl. When the Trump administration slapped tariffs on Chinese goods, China didn't just sit there twiddling their thumbs. Oh no, they hit back, and hard, targeting American agriculture like a sniper picking off the heart of our economy. For decades, China was one of our biggest customers, buying up soybeans, corn, pork, you name it. But the second tariff made our products more expensive. China took its business elsewhere, and here's where it gets brutal. One of those markets were gone. They weren't coming back. Why would China deal with us when Brazil and Argentina are bending over backwards to fill the gap? They're offering competitive prices, no drama, and stable trade relationships. In other words, they're doing what the US used to do before we got bogged down in this trade mess. Which brings us to the woke crowd for a second because you know they got their 2 cents to throw in. Oh, this is just capitalism at work, they say, sipping their overpriced lattes. Really? Because last time I checked, capitalism wasn't about driving your industry into the ground while your competitors cash in. It's infuriating to watch these so-called experts act like losing China as a customer is no big deal. Guess what? It's a massive deal. Losing a market like China is like losing your best client in business. It's not just a hiccup, it's a catastrophe. So here we are, with farmers stuck in the middle of a geopolitical tug-of-war. The woke crowd gets to write think pieces from their urban bubbles, while the real backbone of America, the farmers, get left in the dust. Talk about priorities, huh?
Tariff will impact us by reducing the amount of export sales we have to China and other parts of the world, and that will impact our income and our bottom line for our farmers and for our families. And we need all the income we can right now because we're still suffering from the tariffs that were put on in his last term. that basically shut down some of our markets to China and forced us to have no place to sell our crops in the world to be able to gain an income to feed our families and to sustain our farms.
The financial losses in the farming industry are gut-wrenching, but the emotional toll is perhaps even more devastating. For generations, American farmers have poured everything they had into their land: time, money, sweat, and in many cases, their very identity. Family farms are more than just businesses. They're a legacy, a connection to the past, and a promise to future generations. But watching the legacy unravel due to forces far beyond their control has taken a heavy psychological toll. Farmers take pride in what they do. They're not just growing food, they're feeding the nation. But now, they're left watching as their markets collapse. For farmers who have already endured years of volatility, think bad weather, fluctuating prices, and increasing operational costs, this latest blow feels like a sucker punch. The hardest part? The uncertainty. No one seems to have a clear answer or a solid recovery plan. It's like being trapped in a bad dream with no way out. Farmers who once enjoyed a steady income are now uncertain whether they'll be able to keep their land, their homes, or their businesses afloat. Government aid, which is rolled out with much fanfare, promised to be a lifeline for these struggling families. It's a temporary band-aid. Sure, the aid package helped in the short term, but it didn't fix the root causes of the crisis, like the US losing its biggest export market. Worse, many farmers found themselves excluded from relief programs, intensifying the sense of abandonment. This wasn't just a financial crisis for these families, it was a betrayal by the very government they turned to for support. And as the aid runs out, they're right back where they started with no clear solution in sight. It's heartbreaking. When farmers lose their markets, it doesn't just affect them, it sends shockwaves through the entire agricultural supply chain. We're talking truckers who haul the crops to market, grain elevator operators who store them, and small-town businesses that rely on farming communities to survive. The ripple effect is massive. Think about it. When the harvests aren't sold, the truckers have fewer loads to carry, which means they don't make money. Grain elevator operators are left with empty silos, and small businesses, from diners to hardware stores, lose customers who would normally be spending their hard-earned cash on everyday goods. These businesses have built their livelihoods around farming communities. When the farms go under, so do much of the local economy. You don't need a PhD to understand that a small-town economy collapses. The larger national economy feels it too. And it's not just the local economy that's hurting. The US has long been the world's top agricultural exporter, feeding billions of people.
The economic consequences of these tariffs could be enormous, involving multiple industries, consumer goods, and groceries. Put together, last year, China, Mexico, and Canada bought more than $1 trillion worth of US exports, and they sold nearly $1.5 trillion worth of goods and services to the US.
But as China and other countries start turning to Brazil, Argentina, and others for agricultural needs, the US risks losing its place as the global leader. The impact on international trade and the global economy could be staggering. The once unshakable dominance of American farming is now in jeopardy, and the fallout is starting to show in places you wouldn't expect, from international trade negotiations to the price of groceries in your local store. So while the farmers market may seem far removed from Wall Street, don't be fooled. The entire economic ecosystem is intertwined, and when one part starts to crumble, the rest soon follows. The big question is whether the US agricultural industry can recover from this mess it's in. The short answer, it's unclear. With trade talks between the US and China ongoing, farmers are still left to scramble for smaller, less lucrative markets. The once dominant export of American soybeans, corn, and other products to China has all but evaporated. Instead, the US is left fighting for scraps, trying to secure contracts with smaller nations that don't have the buying power that China once did. And once its true diversification might help some farmers, the global market has changed, and it's uncertain whether the US can regain its footing in time. Looking to countries like Brazil and Argentina for a solution seems unlikely. These nations are now competing with US farms, offering more attractive prices and stable trade relationships. So while it may be possible to rebuild relationships and secure new markets, many experts say that the damage has already been done. The US may never regain its position as the world's agricultural powerhouse. That's not just a loss for farmers, it's a blow to the entire nation's economic strength. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.